All right. Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. We should be live here. Just some house cleaning stuff before we get started. Jeff is out. He's still on second shift. He has his own show called Spaces or Laces. That launches every Thursday or Friday, depending on, we're trying to get the podcast approved. I think he's going to post a video on YouTube on Thursday, and then the following Friday or Thursday, depending on how the workflow goes, getting the podcast version up, that will be live. Same with this show. Going to go live every Tuesday, and then hopefully what we were able to do last week is get the podcast up right away so that hopefully you can get it Wednesday morning if you're on the audio only. I do have some feedback too from people who listen audio only, so I'm trying to make adjustments so that it is easier for you to follow along. So we're going to try some of those today, and hopefully those work out. But we're going to go ahead and kick it off. Rick is out this week. He's actually sick, so I was hoping to get him back on, and hopefully he's feeling better. He'll be able to make it back next week. We're going to kick it off and go kind of what we've been doing, covering a fantasy position, and then we're going to go through our previews for the other NFL divisions. Before we start, though, we'll check in on the Pirates. Pirates, as of right now, they're up on the Tigers, but they're 4.5 games back. To me, I think they're pretty much done. I know that the only reason I still have reservations, or I think that they might be able to come back, is due to the fact that they play the Cubs, who are currently in first, and they play pretty much their division. But they had a chance to crawl back against very weak competition, and they weren't able to do it. Very frustrating. Matt, I don't know if you had any thoughts on that before we started on football.
Actually, kind of looking at it, as soon as you leave them for dead, it seems like the Pirates can catch a hot streak and will rattle off 9 of 10 or 8 of 10 or do something that'll push them right in contention. I don't see anyone really running away right now with the NL Central, so I think the more, as time will tell who's going to be the front runner there. I mean, I know the Cubs are still in first place right now, and Pirates, like you said, are down 4.5, but at a drop of a hat, they can catch fire and be in the mix before the end of the season.
Yeah, and it only takes one series against the leader to pretty much cut that lead in half. Even if they don't sweep, they can still take the lead or get a game or two up and start to catch up. So I don't want to count them out yet. McCutchen's still hitting hot. I think he had another home run today before we went live. So it's still kind of early. I didn't put the flag at half-mast yet, but that might be coming down the pipe. All right, we're going to transition into football. Now, I hung out with Jeff this weekend. He listens to the show. He was stealing some of my ideas, so I just wanted to give him a shout-out, tell him that he can learn all of my strategies on the show. He's still not going to beat me. He actually pointed it out that I eliminated him from the playoffs the past 2 seasons. So, with that, fantasy talk, for Rick, I was hoping he was on. I'm catching up to him in baseball after I got ripped off with those losses, when was that, 2 weeks ago? I'm 1/1000%, however you say that, behind. He has a winning percentage of like .553, and I'm .552, I think. So the slimmest of margins prevented me from wearing a Top Gun hat this week for the show whenever I regain that number 1 position. I'm winning right now 16-3. He's losing his matchup. So hopefully next week I can get that done. But we're going to continue with fantasy running backs. I have some of the same stats I brought in for quarterbacks last week. I'm going to pull up the first one here. And this first one is actually, let me get some stuff situated here on the show. The 2014, I'm going to bring that up first. Now, this is based on some feedback. Instead of shoving all the stats on one screen, I'm going to break it down first. Now, what I'm looking at here are just the general points. And I want to make a note before I start. For fantasy running backs, you have to look at the scoring for your league. Right now, we play point per reception. So that's going to swing the points in favor of a couple different guys that can catch the ball out of the backfield. traditional running backs are going to take a hit. So you definitely need to look at that. Another stat that you might not see on traditional fantasy websites is targets. That means the quarterback throws a pass to your running back. Check that number out, because even if your running back's getting 10 targets a game, he's only catching 2 or 3. That means he's still getting 10 looks. So that's another number that you might think, well, how many of those did he drop? How many were throwaways? As long as he's getting looks, that's going to put him over someone who's just a traditional power running back that leaves the field on third down. So looking at 2014, Le'Veon Bell, Steelers running back, was the clear number 1. DeMarco Murray was number 2. And whenever you go down the list here, those two had a clear advantage in fantasy points. Le'Veon Bell had 370 points total for the season. The number 2 had 350. So that's 20 more points, depending on how many weeks you play. That's an extra 2 or 3 points a week if you get the top running back. It's kind of similar to the top quarterback. Now, can you make it up? Possibly. But some of the running backs have a very short shelf life, and I'm going to go through these past years pretty quickly just to prove that point. So some of the guys we have on the list, Arian Foster, Eddie Lacy, CJ Anderson, Justin Forsett. If you go ahead and go to 2015, those guys all drop off the list. Almost a completely different list. Number 1's Devonta Freeman at 316 points. And you can look here, the difference in running backs from year to year, it varies. So you're going to have to kind of make your pick. Do you want to go heavy with the running back, or do you want to wait and try to make up with some receivers? In a point per reception league like we play, it's pretty much a toss-up. I've had success both ways, going with a receiver-heavy team, and then last year with David Johnson and a run-heavy team. So you're going to have to just make that decision. So Adrian Peterson, he's number 2 on this list. Again, there's a 45, if I'm doing the math right, it might be 55. 55-point difference between the top guy, Devonta Freeman, and Adrian Peterson. That's one where if you're in an auction like we are, it's worth it to bid for that top running back, because that's 4 or 5 extra points a week. And this is a trend that continues. Again, if I bring up 2016, and like I said, last year I had David Johnson, I brought it up before. Here he is with 407 fantasy points, which you knew from the previous 2 years, the top guy had 300. So if you're able to pick a guy like David Johnson who catches the ball out of the backfield, that's an extra 5 points a week that the second guy is not going to get. So that's what you're looking at. Just going through, looking at these guys, you can see some of the same ones from previous years. Devonta Freeman, he's in the top 10. Le'Veon Bell again's in the top 10. You have newcomers, Ezekiel Elliott, he was a rookie. He's number 2 on the list. But you're still going to see some of the same guys. I think Melvin Gordon's on here, I didn't mention him. And DeMarco Murray. So if you can land a guy that's been consistently a top running back, the one thing you have to look at, though, is age. Running backs have a short shelf life. Once they get so many carries, they can't go ahead. They're just going to drop off. So I'm going to go ahead, Matt. You want to give your initial thoughts? I'm actually going to send you the value list for this year so you can take a look at it while you do that.
Okay. I actually had one of the lists, and one of the things that stood out to me was Eddie Lacy's value is at $6 right now. I'm kind of curious to see how that is going to play out playing in Seattle, where in the system that Marshawn Lynch played and had a lot of success in there, he's going to be in that similar role, and he's earning upwards of close to $300,000 just for losing weight, just by going into training camp at the appropriate times. Like, he's already made, I want to say it's around $200,000 that he has a potential to make even more money. Just every so many months he has to make weight and has these weigh-ins, and he made it the first 2 months, but they didn't release in August whether he made his bonus or not. But each like period, like every other month or something like that, it's built in that he's supposed to make weight, and if he doesn't do that, then he's missing out on bonus money.
That's crazy. And well, just to add in here, just looking at this list too, if you're able to get a value pick like that, the 10th ranked player from last year, since I have it up, is Jordan Howard. How many people do you think actually went out and spent big money on him or an early draft pick on him? But go ahead, Matt, you can continue.
But I'm not surprised when you look at the top three: Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson, and Ezekiel Elliott. They're the top three running backs, but they're also the top 4 overall players in the NFL, and there's a reason for that, because they make plays not just in the running game. They're also valuable people in the passing game as well. I really like Le'Veon Bell. It's almost frustrating at times to watch him because you think, what are you doing? Like, he takes a handoff and he's just kind of standing there, and then all of a sudden he like hits the Jets and he turns it into like an 8-9 yard gain. It's pretty cool watching him carry the ball. So I'm not surprised to see him at that number 1 spot. I think $57 for him though is a bit. I don't know, the league where you have an auction limit of $200, is it worth putting over half your money in, or over a quarter of your money in for one player? I don't know. I think there's other options, there's other value there. When you look comparatively, I'll be surprised in most leagues if they're doing an auction style that Marshawn Lynch doesn't just go through. I think he's going to be one that's going to break the bank somewhere. They have him listed at $27, which I think to get him at that would be really good, being that the Raiders are going to be doing a lot of run-pass option type plays, so he's going to have chances to carry the ball and also be an asset in the passing game as well.
Yeah, and I put up the top 10. So previously I had up last year's points. Currently on the screen, and for the guys listening at home, the podcast guys, I have a list of projections for this year. What we're looking at, they give the number 1, or the top 10 running backs. That's the number on your left. The second number there is the overall, out of the whole NFL pool. If you're doing a snake draft, that's what draft pick you should use. And they're very, very heavy into running backs. And when you look at points, some of those running backs were only scoring 200 points compared to, if we looked at last week, you had a couple quarterbacks that were up there scoring 300. So if you're not able to get one of these top guys and there's a 50-point drop from the top guy every year, maybe spend it on a quarterback. Maybe not take a running back number 2 if there's going to be that drop, and you can get, say, an Aaron Rodgers who's going to get you more overall points each week. That's something you have to weigh. So go back through. Don't just take these lists on blind faith, because this is an ESPN list. I will say we have 14 guys in our league currently, or last year. Now, they had, like Matt said, Le'Veon Bell listed for $57. He would go higher than that. I got David Johnson last year. He wasn't even the number 1 pick. I think Odell Beckham was like $90. I got David Johnson for $70, and like I've stated before, I'm going to keep him just for that overall pop value. But that's something you also have to look at. Do you want to spend a third or a fourth of your budget on one guy? And like Matt said, there are a couple different value guys, so that's what's going to happen. You're going to have to take, if you're going to take the top guy, you're going to have to try to find a secondary running back that can get you consistent points. And that's where Marshawn Lynch or some of these other guys are going to be able to fill in and make up points for you on a low budget, or if you're doing a snake draft on a lower pick. So go ahead, Matt.
Now here's something else, and I'm not sure what your thoughts are on this. How do you feel about handcuffing players? Like, for example, with Cleveland, they use Duke Johnson, and they also have Isaiah Crowell. What are your thoughts as taking a player and then trying to make sure that you have the handcuff player with them?
Well, I'll tell you, I had Crowell, was it 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and it's frustrating. To me, it's not worth it. I would rather have a guy that you know is going to get consistent touches. Maybe it's just the offense. Maybe it was just the Browns. But it would seem like every week I couldn't be consistent with my lineup because Crowell 1 week, he'd play third downs. The next week, he wouldn't. And then another week, they would have him as the goal line back, and he'd get a touchdown. And then the next week, he would just be the third down pass catching back. As soon as they got anywhere in the red zone, he was out. So at that point, yeah, like you said, then you're going to have to take both guys, and then you're looking at the team. Is the Browns worth it? Are they going to be able to score that many points to make it worthwhile? The one team who that I think in past years that would have made it worth it would have been those Saints teams when they did the double running back spread, and you knew both of them were going to be in on passing downs, and they had kind of like the 2 running back shotgun going. But that was quite a few years ago, I think. That was back when they went to the Super Bowl, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, it's few and far between. I would rather have a LaShawn McCoy. They have him high on here, but I've seen him fall in past years where you can get him in the 3rd or 4th round, and you know he's the workhorse. He's going to get the carries. I'm more confident. I feel better if I get a guy like that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I actually had Crowell last year, kind of trying to figure out who's going to be a guy that is going to get you some touchdowns. I mean, there were weeks where you're absolutely right. He rattled off 23 points against Washington, 21 against Baltimore. I think he had another 21 against the Chargers. And you kind of have to take – I think you can take a player like that if you have somewhat of a balance. Like if you know in the ballpark of what your team's averaging, you can take a risk on a guy like him, knowing that for every week that you get 20 points and maybe you blow your opponent out by 100 points total, you could have weeks where, like against Buffalo, he has 2 yards. Or there's another, against New England, he had 4. He had 4 points. So you kind of do you take the highs and kind of gamble that he's going to get the touches, or is their offense going to stall out? I mean, I think later in drafts, sometimes it's okay to take a risk on a player like that and hope that he pans out. Another scenario that I think to look at, like in a similar situation, was what the Tennessee Titans did last year. They had Derrick Henry, the running back from Alabama, and they also had DeMarco Murray. And early in the preseason, I think people don't really give a lot of credit to watching preseason games or care about it, but I think you get a tendency for what teams are going to do in the regular season based off of how they carry themselves in preseason. And I can remember watching and the commentators kind of looking down their noses at what Tennessee was doing offensively, saying that the coach was dedicated to the run game. They were going to be smash mouth. Well, I started thinking, DeMarco Murray then is going to be one of those workhorses in that backfield. Even if you have 1 or 2 of them and they split carries, he's still going to get a good many points both in the running game and passing game out of the backfield. And there was only 2 games, and it was towards the end of the year against Jacksonville and Houston, that he had 7 points and 3 points. But other than that, he was a double-digit scorer every week. And even through the first 4 games, he was averaging over 20 points. So it's one of those, if you know that you're splitting carries, but it's going to be in a run-focused situation, it may pay out that you get one, if not both of those backs.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And that's another tip for people. If you're not familiar with like the drafting situation, take a look and make sure that you have bye weeks marked, because instead of waiting and trying to get one of these guys in free agency, it might be worth it to take one of the guys from a 2-back system with a late pick. And then if they're hot, like Matt said, they're getting carries every couple weeks. Maybe it's something with the opponent. Okay, well, instead of my number 2 guy, I have a feeling that he's going to run it up against so-and-so team, and then you can make the switch. Maybe play him at flex. I've done that before, which is kind of unconventional. Have 3 running backs in because I'm using the flex on a running back that's more of a 3rd down back, knowing that maybe I had a receiver hurt or it's a bye week and I don't want to pick up a gamble at receiver that might only get 2 targets when I know my 3rd down back's going to get 5 or 6 targets a game and at least 5 points, hopefully, if he is able to make the catch. So it's another pick, or at least this position, is something where you can get depth at that from these 2-back systems. But again, it also depends on how many people are in your league, because there's only so many running backs. I think each team, how many do you think percentage-wise have or mainly focus on one running back? At least a third of the teams, I would think.
Yeah, maybe. I think if you can get at least one bell carrier for you, I think that, a lot of teams carry multiple running backs, but I think if you can find one guy that you're willing to spend the money on, that you say, this is going to be my guy, I think that's something that can be valuable for you. To me, I personally place a high value in running backs, especially with our league being PPR. I think that backs are being utilized more as wide receivers and creating matchups as the spread is now starting to become more popular in the NFL. How, in college it's very predominantly you're starting to see that trickle up effect now into the NFL, where they're starting to incorporate those concepts, and it's putting these great athletes like Le'Veon Bell and David Johnson and putting them in space and making the defenders have to close that gap, not just focusing on an interior run, but also on the outside game as well. And I definitely think that it gives an advantage to guys like Devontae Freeman, who are now pass catchers out of the backfield and able to make plays in space.
And I agree with Matt with that, and I think that's why we've both had success in our league. Get a good running back if you can. I went out on David Johnson. I'm going to keep him this year because we play you get to keep one guy, and his salary you paid last year counts against your cap this year, which I paid, I think it was $70 or something, and it's a $200 max budget. So I'm already taking a third of my team out of the way, but David Johnson's unique because they'll throw him out in the slot, and we do play point per reception. So there's times where on third down they bring in another running back, but they move David Johnson out to the slot, and he catches a slant or a quick hook and might pick me up an extra point or two. So I always go with one good running back. I've had pure running guys. I had Forte a few years ago when he was with the Bears. I always go with one guy. My second guys, though, I wouldn't break the bank because we have an auction style. So, let's say this year, Ezekiel Elliott, they have him pegged for 55. I wouldn't go all out and get him as my second workhorse and have two big running backs just because receivers are less expensive. And running backs, they can get hurt and your whole season's gone. So normally what I do, my strategy is to get two running backs, maybe one's a third down back, and play them based on matchups. And then I rotate pretty heavily. But it all depends on who's available and what cost. Because if you're in an auction like I am, let's say I spent 70 already on David Johnson, then my last two running backs I probably wouldn't spend more than 20 on. So I'd have to get a value, maybe that's a 15 and 5. Maybe I grab two guys in a row at $10, maybe 12 and 8, something like that. But I'm looking for a split that's a lot lower and hoping that David Johnson just carries my team and hope he doesn't get hurt again this year.
Well, and here's something else, just some food for thought. If you're in a deep league and maybe you only have that opportunity to get one guy, so maybe you take like a Le'Veon Bell, or you have a DeMarco Murray or Jay Ajayi, and that's your go-to guy that you're banking on. Well, if you only have that opportunity to get one of those guys and you're spreading your money out through all the other positions, a good place to find value as the season progresses is trying to take advantage of your free agency market. If you're keeping an eye on who's getting injured and you play that smart, you should have a lot of money later in the year to be able to find, when Ajayi got his chance, it was like the Dolphins running back got hurt and you just knew, was it Arian Foster that re-injured his knee? Whatever the situation was.
Yeah, maybe. I can't remember now.
That whoever got hurt, it set it up so that he stepped right in, and I knew he was going to be a guy that was going to see a lot of significant playing time the rest of the year. So I broke my bank trying to spend for him, knowing that with our league we're blind betting for free agents. Was able to sign a number one running back. It was a steeper price, but I guaranteed that he was going to be on my team, and he added a significant number of points at an important part of the year. So, that's another way that if you have a big league and you have a lot of people, that's a good way to add a significant playmaker that may be the difference between getting knocked out first round of playoffs and making a run for the championship.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And it's something that I've done in the past too, to kind of build off what Matt was saying. Well, for some background, if you're not in an auction league, how it works is instead of waivers to see who gets the guy first, you put down a blind bet, and you have another $200 salary that doesn't get renewed, which of course I didn't know. And was it whenever Chris Johnson got picked up by the Cardinals, same situation. I think he wasn't playing much or someone got hurt. And I knew, okay, I need a running back. I was around 500 that year and I needed a push for the playoffs. So I broke the bank. I used the rest of my money that year. It was either 2 or 3 years ago. And it paid off. I was able to get a top tier running back from the free agency pool. The only thing I recommend is don't break the bank, because that was the same year that I was stuck with the Eagles defense scoring me 12 negative points each week. And it was almost better for me just to bench my defense and play nobody because they were so hot and cold. One week they'd have 20 points, the next week they'd be negative 10. So don't go all out, but kind of budget yourself. It's tough if you're doing auction. If you're in waivers, you're going to be kind of stuck. But hopefully if you need to make that type of move, you're probably going to be lower in the standings anyway, so you might be able to make that pickup. But definitely look at situations. Normally, I think the NFL.com, or even if you just search in Google, you can type in depth chart, and you can see which guys have been moving up. If someone gets injured, they'll put it up. And that's another tip you can use across sports. I lost in fantasy baseball this year Justin Wilson. Remember how this is a few weeks ago I gave tips on closers and said to look for the trade deadline? Well, I was on the raw end of the deal this year because Justin Wilson was a closer for the Tigers. He got traded to, I think, the Cubs, and now he's a setup man. So I lose saves each week. I had to cut him and pick up, was it Rosenthal? Is he the Cardinals save closer?
One of, yes.
Yeah, so I went with him, and just the short end of the stick there, I gambled. I knew he was trade bait. I was hoping he would go to a place where he would be a closer, and it just didn't happen. Same with running backs. So you can see, even in Pittsburgh here, James Conner, he's getting reps in spring training. And if Bell doesn't do anything, I guess it's not really called spring training, fall camp, then maybe there's some issues with Bell coming back. He's holding out for a contract, whatever. He might get some significant playing time. Plus, the Steelers do play in a division where they get in some blowout games sometimes, and the second guy can pick up some points in garbage time. So that's another thing to look for, high-scoring offenses, or even a team like New England who spreads the load around. They don't really have a number one, even though last year I think Blunt was on the list of the top 10 scoring running backs, but was Deion Lewis, he was out still. Is he back?
I think he is.
That's another guy to look out for. I know he's on the list.
I saw on NFL Network they were talking about like the depth chart that they had. They had like this ridiculous list of like 1,000 running backs that they had in camp. So they're definitely going to have to trim a bunch of those guys down. It was just a matter of who's gonna go where.
Yeah, and it's something where depending on when you're drafted, you're just going to have to kind of make that decision. Okay, I need to make a decision on a second or third guy. Is he going to make it through camp? If not, then you're stuck just picking someone up in free agent. I've had that happen before. Took a gamble on a rookie. He got stuck on the practice squad. Then you're stuck cutting him, picking someone else up. So it's still going to be a gamble. I recommend, just to wrap this up, I recommend going for a big-time number one running back. My guy this year is David Johnson. I talked to some other guys, some other Southbound Sports guys, and kind of a split between Johnson and Bell. I don't see, let me look it up here and see if there was any dark horses listed. I have Jeff's list too. He had Todd Gurley, who's not in the top 10 on ESPN. You might be able to get him a deal for him. I think Rick actually has been stashing him in our league for years now, hoping that he has a breakthrough. And he said, should I keep him this year? I said, I'd definitely do that. Definitely take that pick because I don't think he's going to end up top 5. But I think everyone else is pretty solid. The top 3, Bell, Johnson, Elliott, like Matt said, those are going to be your guys. I think there's a clear drop from Elliott to LaShawn McCoy. And LaShawn McCoy I've had as a serviceable number 2 before. Back whenever he first went to the Bills, he wasn't valued as high Or maybe he was still on the Eagles back then. That might have been one of the Chip Kelly years when no one knew what their offense was going to do. So that's another thing, too. Look for new schemes. Maybe you can pick some other guys up that are undervalued just because they're unsure of what offense they're going to run. Any final thoughts by you, Matt?
Yeah, when you're looking at those running backs, also look at something to consider is also contract year stuff. A guy like Le'Veon Bell, he has to perform to warrant that franchise tag tender. I know that that's what they're offering right now, and he can continue to be signed on that over the next couple of years if they don't put a long-term contract in place. But also injury history. If you're going to spend, $57 or more on a guy like Le'Veon Bell who hasn't played a full season, then you better make sure that you're at least thinking of a contingency plan for when he pulls his hamstring or quad or rolls an ankle or does whatever it is that he does that he gets hurt. You have something in place so that you're not left with nothing.
Yeah, and that's a good tip. Definitely look at contract years. I know someone who does that for fantasy hockey. They just look for guys, scorers for like the fill out their bench of all guys who are in contract years, because they know that they either have to perform or they're not going to get that money deal. So, good tip there. And now we're going to go ahead and make our transition into our NFL division previews. We're going to go ahead, and I figured I would start with the AFC North. Go ahead and make the switch here. Oh. All right. Our AFC North, we've been pretty consistent on this. I know we're kind of Pittsburgh biased, but I don't see there's any way the Steelers don't win this division. There's just too much unknown. Flacco and his back, the Browns' whole offense, and another coaching decisions and where they're going with the team. I like the players they're bringing in, but it's just, I don't think it's going to be enough this year. They're still in a year or two away. The Bengals are the one that intrigues me. I had the Steelers at about 12 wins. The Bengals, actually, my list looked pretty close to what our final list here is, and I'll read them for the podcast, guys. So our division, how it goes, and just a reminder, we did this as a panel, and these are the averages. So at the end of all of this, the win totals might not match up, because these are a couple guys. We have a panel of guys making their picks, and then we average them together. So the Steelers right now, 12 wins. We have them winning the division. The Bengals are right on the brink of the playoffs with 8 wins. Then you have the Ravens with 6, which, I mean, with the quarterback situation, that seems about right. And then the Cleveland Browns with 4, which I believe is what they had last year. So, Matt, go ahead. You can kick this off. What are your thoughts on the AFC North this year?
I still think that the division runs through Pittsburgh. I mean, the consistent play, plus with Ben starting to enter those talks of retirement, I just hope that when he finally decides to hang it up, that he doesn't pull a Brett Favre and I'm retired, oh psych, I'm retired, oh psych, and just keep going back and forth, make that clear cut that when you're ready to be done, and then make that transition, as seamless as possible. With what they've been doing scheme-wise for the last couple of years has been relatively consistent. I think it shows in how they play. They're finally starting to get some picks to pan out in the secondary with Artie Burns. We're not such a liability where it's if the front front seven doesn't get the pressure on them, then they're just going to give up touchdowns. So I think that within the division, I think they easily have a hand in. Actually, to me, my dark horse this year is going to be Cleveland. When you look at how their season played out, first off, Hugh Jackson is a hell of a coach. He was the offensive coordinator in Cincinnati that's been giving Pittsburgh fits for the longest time. He was there. Don't throw up there.
I know. I just have a cough. I can't get rid of it.
But he was managing that offense over in Cleveland. He had Josh Gordon suspended with his performance drugs. He had Corey Coleman, who started the year out really good and got injured. It was like progressively through the course of last year, you just had player after player after player get injured. I know at one point in one of our group texts, I had said if they ever could keep a group of people healthy, they may have the pieces together. I know the quarterback situation there is kind of scary, but I think they have enough with Osweiler, with the rookie Kaiser, with Cody Kessler from last year that seemed to be making progress until he got injured. Maybe they have enough. They added Myles Garrett and they added Jabril Peppers in the offseason. I know you've spoken highly of Peppers and the things that he's able to do and what they're planning on potentially doing. So I think, this could be a year where maybe they don't push Pittsburgh out, but they're definitely going to start to put themselves in a position to not just be the doormat of the division. I think with Flacco's injury, the Ravens are in trouble right now. I'm actually surprised that they weren't trying to push more to get either Cutler or be in the running right now for Kaepernick. I know they're kind of hit or miss with what they want to do with that. One of the things I'd seen said that Harbaugh had talked with his brother trying to get a feel, and they were okay with, the head coach and the GM were okay with signing Kaepernick, but the owners just didn't want to follow through with that. So it looks like they're going to go in another direction for that.
Yeah, I think we mentioned it last week about the Kaepernick thing. If it was an owner decision, I don't know how you don't make that. I mean, I guess it couldn't have been as bad as what the Dolphins. We went through the NFC or the AFC East last week, but news came out that the Dolphins had talked about signing Tim Tebow, which he hasn't played for years. It's not like he had just got off the free agent list where he beat Pittsburgh in the playoffs. So maybe the free agent pool is that dire. Maybe they think that these guys that are available aren't that good. I mentioned it before. I'm surprised no one went after Romo. Even the Dolphins, he wasn't even mentioned in their list. He was closer to the field than what I think Tebow is. Tebow hasn't even been practicing. He's been playing baseball. So to even discuss him and bring him up and not mention someone like Tony Romo, I don't understand it. Maybe it's the injury thing. They just don't want to have someone learn the offense, knowing that there's a good chance he's old, he's going to get injured. I don't know. I had the Ravens a lot lower than what our pool ended up having them. I think they're going to be closer to the Browns, around 5 wins. I actually had them around 4. I had the Browns on top, I think. Browns 5, Ravens 4. I think the Browns, like you said, they have a lot of young guys. The reason that scares me is you mentioned Peppers. I've heard he's had to play offense and defense. In college, that worked because he's a playmaker. In the NFL, that doesn't work. So that just means that they don't have the weapons yet if they have a playmaker come in. Now, every once in a while for a third down back or maybe a slot receiver, yeah, that's fine. But relying on him to make plays, that scares me at the NFL level. So I think they're a year or two away if they get some of the guys. If they would have been able to keep a guy like Pryor, who I've heard great things about so far, this fall, maybe if they had another playmaker, they just hit some runs where they're in a transition. I do like their coaching hire, the coaching decision, and the direction they're going in. And I just think they're a year or two away. This is their chance. They can pass Baltimore up, and hopefully for good. And it's gonna line up perfectly for them. Because, like you said, Ben Roethlisberger, he's close to retiring. I think he retires after this year. I think the Steelers are all in. I think he actually might have retired this year or last year if the Steelers didn't make that AFC Championship game. He must have felt that he was so close with this group of guys that he has a chance at a run, and I think that's what's going to happen. They're going to end up at least trying to make that push for the AFC Championship game, hopefully another Super Bowl, and we can see that. The Bengals, I don't know. They're just not consistent enough. They've been close to making that leap. They're not disciplined. When you have guys on your team that aren't disciplined, that's on the head coach. I'm sorry, but it is. The head coach has to draw the line and get these guys over the hump. And I think it's ironic that our panel ended up then with 8 wins because that's right on the border of the playoffs. Historically, that's where they've been because of these discipline issues and people just going all out, like that crazy game against the Steelers.
Vontaze Burfict.
Yeah, was that 2 years ago already? Or was that last year? I don't know, but
yeah,
the craziness. Like, there's no reason. Like, act like you know how to win, and then you'll win. Until then, you're going to be listed in the middle of the division. So that's all I have for this. I did see, I want to get your thoughts. So the Steelers extended Tomlin for 2 more years. I don't know if we've talked about it on the show yet. What are your thoughts on that?
When they originally hired him, I wasn't really a fan just because I thought they needed to they had a good coach in Ken Wisenhunt, and I thought with what he was doing offensively, I would have liked to have just hired from within. But over the years and seeing, having the consistency there, I'm not anti it. But the one thing that I would like to see more from Coach Tomlin would be a little bit more emotion. It's just like guys do stupid penalties, and he just acts like he's not even paying attention. It's just like he's thinking about something else. And there's no with Cowher, you knew when he was pissed at someone, and he would be in their faces and yelling. And I understand that there's different styles, but in emotional moments of the game, there's nothing. Act interested. You're getting paid millions of dollars. Like, have some fun.
You know what that reminded me of? I've been talking to Jeff about he's so excited for Pitt to play Penn State, but it got me and him talking about the backyard brawl. I went back and watched the Pitt upset. Was it 2007? And I saw Coach Wannstedt, and I know that was your dad's biggest beef, was that Wannstedt would always be on the sideline fixing his hair or combing his mustache or doing something instead of defending his guys.
Looking at his watch.
It must be a Pittsburgh thing. Tomlin, him, they're just hanging out. And I guess, Cowher, he had the chin. You could tell he was pissed off on the sideline all the time. Maybe we're just used to having that fire. But with Tomlin, I see some of those things, and it's been close. They're not as undisciplined with them, nowhere near the Bengals. But they do have some of those moments, and you can see it on the field where someone will just do something, and they'll just give Tomlin a look, and you know that they made the wrong play or they run the wrong route or whatever. Some of those, I think, like the Bell, like you talked, he'll be hanging out, and he should probably be running a route or something. Ben dumps it off and he makes a play on his own, but it kind of looked like he was taking a play off. He just happened to get lucky. And some of those where they're giving the looks to him and Tomlin, it's kind of like, is he letting the players run the team? And that's what scares me when they give these 2-year extension. Maybe Ben runs the team. I mean, he was a carryover, a championship quarterback. He's big, he's poised, he can take the hits. That's what scares me. And if he retires, I mean, the Browns have to be ready if they're trying to make a bump, because otherwise, I don't see the Bengals until they make some regime changes. They're not going to take over the division. And Baltimore is kind of on a downturn too. So the Browns, if they can kind of put it together, they can stop being the laughingstock here whenever Ben retires, because whether they keep Tomlin or not, I don't think he's the driving force behind the Steelers.
And I would definitely agree with that. The thing that scares me more than Ben retiring is what is the plan for the post-Ben era? It just seems like they're banking on him just being willing to stick around and playing till he's 40 and just kind of kicking the can, because they must have a lot of stock in the fact that Landry Jones can get it done. And I know we kind of talked a little bit about that and issues with that, but it just seems like if Ben gets hurt and they put him in, the offense just grinds to a halt. And it's like, at what point do you analyze that and say, we need to upgrade this position and maybe, spend a pick or go out and find someone in free agency to try to test some of these other arms out to see what actually is out there, maybe finding someone that can get the job done, so you're not just stuck treading water in the event that your quarterback goes down.
And I think it's a personnel thing. because, and I know we're going long on the AFC North, but Steelers are in this division, so whatever. The personnel that the Steelers draft, they're always drafting these pro quarterbacks. And I think Ben, with his style, is closer to a spread quarterback. He's always moving in the pocket. That's how the plays develop. He's always breaking the pocket, breaking contain, always rolling out. I love that type of offense. He definitely loves it. I think it's something that he learned in Miami of Ohio. I watched a lot of tape on him when he was coming out because I wasn't sure if the Steelers should have used such a high pick on him. But he's used to moving and making throws on the run. The Steelers then go ahead, and like you said, they're putting in these pro guys, even though Landry Jones played in a sort of spread. It's not the spread where he was running and throwing. It was more of a, if he's running, he's running. Where Ben was used to more of the rollouts, a flood pass, that type of running that not a lot of teams do these days. And whenever you get that guy who's either, he sees it, and he's like, all right, head down, I'm running. Then, yeah, the offense grinds to a halt, and it might work in college whenever you have the talent like Oklahoma did with Landry Jones, where they're overpowering these weak defenses in the Big 12. But in the NFL, that doesn't work. Even Vince Young struggled. Jamarcus Russell struggled. These are all big spread run-first quarterbacks like Landry Jones, and they're not able to be elusive and run. I'm thinking like when the Steelers signed Michael Vick, I think they started to realize that, hey, maybe we need a guy more like Vick who is actually closer to Ben than these guys we're bringing in. But I mean, he was so old at that time, and I don't even know who you would get, because the only guy that I think big time, I guess Jameis Winston would have been a guy that would have fit that mold, and possibly Cam Newton. Cam Newton was able to, he makes good throws on the run. And other than that, Kaepernick? But Kaepernick's not accurate. We talked about that before. And Ben is. So that's where you kind of have to make that pick, and it's a tough position because of the style that the Steelers needs with their small, shifty wide receivers. And I think they've always been that way. Because if you look, who were their big guys in the mid-2000s? Hines Ward, small. Randall L., small. So you need a quarterback that's able to run and give these shifty guys some room. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I think of the wide receivers that have gone through, and you look at Emmanuel Sanders, and you look what's his name? Williams. There was like all these different guys that have gone through that have played with Pittsburgh, and they try to sign these big money deals elsewhere, and they never end up playing as well as what they did in Pittsburgh, having been there. And I can remember early on watching Ben, and it was so frustrating, being that I coached quarterbacks. It was like, what's he doing? He's just running around and like throwing the ball around. It's like you think it's so undisciplined, but when he makes play after play, time after time, and he's able to do the things that he does, you just kind of accept. I love watching the footage of Holmgren and Favre, where Holmgren's mic'd up and he's like going, no, 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 and then comes back in and makes a great play, and he just accepts it.
Yeah, and Brett Favre is another one. He's a gunslinger. You saw how much he opened up the offense with the Vikings, even with Peterson, just because he was able to run. And like you said, you're thinking, what is he doing? But his guys are able to get or break free, and that's where that's why the Steelers receivers, they go somewhere else and they're not able to make a name for themselves, because that's what they're used to. The one exception would be Plexico Burress, but that's because he was 6'5". He was more of that guy that could stretch the field and give these smaller guys room to run underneath. Actually, we got a comment that LaShawn McCoy is going to win the rushing title, but I don't think that's going to happen.
No. Actually, I'll be surprised if him and Sammy Watkins make it through the whole season healthy. Both of them, they start the year off really, and then they end up, tripping over a blade of grass and missing 5 weeks. So
it's the
here's your free
curse.
Fantasy tip: don't buy them in your fantasy league, because they're not worth your money.
Well, it's the Buffalo curse set by O.J. Simpson, and he is free. Well, he's going to be free. So maybe they won't get hurt this year. But I guess we should switch to the NFC North. But real quick, I have an alternative pick for the AFC North this week. Just pure shit. The rest of the league. If the Steelers don't win the division, then it will be a major disappointment, and Ben would probably have to have a career-ending injury. But we'll go ahead. We'll leave the North at that, and I'll throw up the NFC North. Now this one, I'll start off. I'll just say I don't want to see the Packers win. I don't think anyone wants to see the Packers win. Do you want to see the Packers in another Super Bowl? No. I'm tired of Aaron Rodgers. This is something that Jeff gave me. He gave me a hot take, and I was going to go ahead and give it on the show. He said that Rodgers broke up with his girlfriend, Olivia Munn. I'll be honest, I had no idea what he was talking about. But he said it happened, and his hot take is now Rodgers is going to be focused, and he's going to go ahead and take the Packers to the Super Bowl. I don't see it, but there it is. That's Jeff's hot take. Hopefully I didn't spoil his show this week, but check out Spaces or Laces this Thursday to hear his full take on the Aaron Rodgers deal. The way it works, I'll go ahead, I'll spit these out for the audio guys. We have the Packers at 11 wins, the Vikings and Lions both at 8 wins, and then the Bears at the bottom with 4 wins. So go ahead, Matt. What's your take on the NFC North?
I kind of agree with where we're at with that. I mean, I think when you look at Chicago, they stripped almost all of the people they could help and have let them go. So Alshon Jeffrey's with Philadelphia now. The running back situation's somewhat solidified, but still kind of chaotic. They moved up in the draft to pick up Trubisky, but it doesn't look like he might be ready in time. So, time will tell if that's going to be a good pick for them or not. I think he has the potential. I'm biased towards quarterbacks because I think if you're willing to take what the quarterback can do well, and I'm sure the Bears did their due diligence, that they are going to put him in a system where he feels comfortable and able to succeed. Just like I thought last year, I was actually surprised that Jared Goff didn't perform better with the Rams because I thought that they'd be able to put him in more of a quick reading, multi RPO style offense like he ran at Cal that I thought would be beneficial. The team that I think may push for the division is going to be Minnesota. A little bit biased here, but Xavier Rhodes signed that extension. Florida State guy getting paid. Gotta love it. They also went out and drafted Dalvin Cook, and the things that he's been able to do when he's healthy is unbelievable. And he played the majority of last year injured and still played the majority of the ACC, and pretty much Francois was getting killed. He was really the main cog in that offense. So I think that they could be, with replacing Adrian Peterson. They also signed the running back from the Raiders. I'm drawing a blank here with his name, but they Latavius Murray. They have him as well. They have a pair of running backs that they can rely on. As long as they can keep their quarterback in bubble wrap and not let Sam Bradford get injured, I think they have a shot at potentially making some noise in the division. But I think a lot of it depends on Sam Bradford staying healthy and kind of seeing how things play out with the pack.
Yeah, and we had some comments that the Vikings have a top defense. I think someone said top 3, so there's no way they don't make the playoffs. I have them higher than the Lions because, again, this is an average. I think they were like a 1/10 of a point away from having 9 wins because we rounded. I didn't want to give like half wins, but I think that was due to we had someone rate them really low, but I don't see it. Like you said, Cook's coming in. He's a game changer, and I think he'll be able to fill that role left by Peterson pretty good. And as long as they have ball control, have the defense, I think that's going to fit. I think it works out pretty well here. There is a good chance, or they do have 3 potential playoff teams here in the Lions, the Vikings, and the Packers. I think the Lions made it last year, and of course the Packers did. I don't think the Vikings did they? Who was the other wild card? I can't remember off the top of my head. Was it the Giants? Or were they the division winner? I don't know. But I'm throwing all kind of random thoughts out. But I could see it happening. They could go ahead, and it's going to be a battle. Even if I think there's definitely going to be two teams out of the North again in the NFC that make the playoffs. Whether it's the Vikings or the Lions, I don't know. I think this is the last year for the Lions. Matt Stafford's already come out and said, hey, they're going to win the division. If they don't, I think you move away from Stafford. Because what is he getting you? You can be so close so many years in a row, but is that their ceiling? I think the fans are tired of it. And the Vikings, like I said, they're in a much better position. So are the Packers. So every year, you're close, but everyone else, but half the league or half your division is in a better position. So it's frustrating, and you would have to guess that they're going to go and make a change if something doesn't change. I mean, they're losing guys. Megatron retired. They tried to get him to training camp. Chad Johnson, he was up in Detroit. He was trying to get to training camp, trying to take that spot. They wouldn't let him on the field. So I don't know. I just don't think. I think for sure it's going to be the Packers and the Vikings on top. The Lions, it could be the start of a downturn. The Bears are definitely already on a downturn. The Trubisky pick, I hated it. It was one of the dumbest draft picks I've ever seen in my life. And the fact that they traded up so high for him when no one else was even, I don't even think anyone else was considering him. It was such a left field move. I had to laugh because it came out of left field. And Bears fans, I mean, they've had kind of a good run, but it wasn't like the Bears have been winning championships. I don't think they've won one since like the 80s. So, it has to be frustrating to be a Bears fan, watching the Packers be consistently good every year, have a draft. Everyone was feeling good about the Bears, and then they trade up, lose a bunch of assets to get Mitch Trubisky, and he's not even ready. So, I don't know. Do you have any final thoughts?
Well,
Go ahead.
Well, I think it was good that they found a quarterback that they wanted to build around, and I think that's a good thing because you figure when they went to the Super Bowl back against the Colts, they were competitive in that game. If they didn't have Rex Grossman as their quarterback, maybe if they had someone competent.
But that's just a bias because you hate the Gators so bad. You hate the Gators so bad you didn't want to see Rex Grossman win a Super Bowl.
Well, he couldn't, so that's a moot point.
True.
So, but I think if they're doing their homework and they're feeling like that's going to be the guy that they want to build around, good for them that they pulled the trigger and felt confident in making that move. But I know to everyone else, it looks terrible. But if he ends up, 15 years and takes Chicago to a Super Bowl, then, all people like us are going to sit there and go, well, yeah, why? Of course they jumped up and grabbed them. Why wouldn't you? But for every guy like that, there's the Achilles Smiths and Cade McNowns and people that fizzle out.
We can throw Jake Locker in there probably. Some of the other ones that were highly sought up the past couple of years ago.
But he has a great mustache. You can't put Jake Locker in there.
So did Jake Plummer, and he also had a mullet. And that didn't work out for him either. Tim Tebow. Wait, did Tim Tebow have more playoff wins than Jake Plummer? Because I think they both played at the Broncos. I don't know, but that'd be funny. I wish that was a true stat. But, okay, well, real quick, last thought then. What level do you think Trubisky has to hit for it not to be a bust? Do you think he has to have an Aaron Rodgers level where every year he's at the top, even if he only wins one Super Bowl, kind of like a Peyton Manning mode, or something like Eli Manning, where he's okay, he wins a couple championships? Would that make it worth it?
I guess if you're a Bears fan and he brings you at least one championship, it's worth it. If he brings Jim Kelly level, where he gets you to a couple Super Bowls, but you don't actually get the championship, but you're still feeling competitive within your division and within your conference. Yeah, I think at a bare bones minimum, you need to at least be competitive within the division. Win your division and make it close. If you're losing to the eventual Super Bowl champion, it kind of takes a little bit of the sting out. Obviously you want to try to push to be the man, but if not, at least like you can kind of hang your hat and say, well, nobody beat him that year, so it is what it is.
Yeah, definitely win the division, I would say. You could also think, because the scenario you laid out was similar to what Matt Ryan did. Won the division a few times, wasn't very good in the playoffs, was losing to the teams that were going to the Super Bowl, finally made it last year. Definitely was not on him. That game last year was not his fault. I mean, you can score so many points on the New England Patriots and be waiting on them to hand you the trophy whenever they have the greatest comeback of all time. But I think that would be success. I think, yeah, definitely he has to start leading them to the NFC North Championship, and I just don't see it. I don't know, but that's my thought.
One of the things that I also think about that, though, when you're looking at is a player a bust or not, is I think look at what the talent is around them. Who are the talent that you have around these people? Because if they continue to have garbage around him, it's tough to say that he's a bust because he was surrounded by garbage. If he ends up having some quality players around him and able to to have some talented running backs or wide receivers or a formidable defense that can carry you through the playoffs. I mean, we talked at length about Baltimore Ravens defense. A great defense can carry you. That all you have to do is just don't lose the game if you have some of those other pieces. So I don't know if you can write him off as a bust immediately. I think it would take time, and you would have to look back to see what was around him. If there was no one around, like even you look for people that say Jamarcus Russell was a bust, what talent did he have around him that was going to make them good? I mean, he could have had Pro Bowlers, in certain places, and maybe that would have helped a little bit with that. But there was a dumpster fire team during that period that they were trying to build around him, but they just couldn't get those other pieces into place.
Well, that made me think. Maybe, just from my perspective, his ceiling to me would be Phillip Rivers. Like you said, he hasn't been given a consistent team. He's always had a bad offensive line. He's always getting killed. Every year, they don't have a consistent defense. He had some great guys on the team, but like a Tomlinson only plays for so many years. Now he has Melvin Gordon. You don't have receivers that stay healthy. I think Keenan Allen, he played and broke his leg in half the 1 year. So that's what I see in the future for the Bears if he's able to control the game and make good plays. Because Phillip Rivers, he wills them to a lot of wins, and that's about it. And a lot of people would like to see Phillip Rivers leave. They're both ACC quarterbacks from the state of North Carolina. Phillip went to NC State. Trubisky's from the Tar Heels. So maybe there'll be some parallels there. I don't know. A lot of the Bears' moves have been very similar to what the Chargers have done, to the point not as bad as like the Chargers trying to move cities or whatever they were doing with that weird Dodgers logo that they were trying to do. But that's what now that I think about it, that would be what I think his ceiling is going to be in the NFL. And would you consider that a success? I don't know.
I think you could call that a success if he's surrounded by chaos and he's the quarterback that bridges them in a rebuild. I agree with that. And if he's constantly having to deal with head coach change and coordinator changes, that's going to hurt his development. The things that's really helped Roethlisberger over his career is he's had relatively few people handling his play calling, so it's been able to help him stay consistent and use similar things that he's comfortable with versus, having to go from head coach and coordinator to different people and learning different styles and trying to figure out what it looks like, because the Chargers offense look like a grab bag of prizes. It just looks like they're just randomly just like pulling plays out of a bag. And it's like, I try to figure out like, what are you trying to accomplish? There's no rhyme or reason in what they do.
That doesn't remind you of the Bears? They had Alshon Jeffrey. He's kind of just running deep. They're like handing off to Forte, and then he gets hurt, and they're like, uh-oh. They're trying to sign like old guys. Like they had Julius Peppers for a while. Remember when they signed him on his downturn? Like that's why I just see the parallel. They're like the NFC version of the Chargers right now. And
definitely, I feel that.
So that's what I'll end with. But do you have any final thoughts before we go this week?
Just good luck to all the high school teams out there that are getting back into things. Stay hydrated. Be ready for your seasons.
Yep. Well, thank you for watching. We'll be back next week. Next week, we're doing fantasy receivers and tight ends, and then we're going to move to another division. I can't remember what that is, so I'm not going to say it on the air. But we'll be tweeting that out, so keep an eye on for that. This will be live next week, Tuesdays around 9. We haven't been getting up quite at 9 o'clock, but that is the game plan, 9, depending on how long it takes us to get the stream approved by Periscope, since we're doing some pretty intense things. But thanks for watching. Please subscribe to us, tell your friends, favorite us. Any comments and stuff, send it to, you can contact our email, send it to us on social media. We appreciate it, and we will see you next week.